these countries have been rolling it back and saying, we're not going to do the drugs and surgeries on kids anymore. Instead, if you've got a child that is dealing with that distress or confusion about their biological sex, let's give them counseling. Let's give them psychotherapy. Let's actually help them find comfort with their biology. And what they found is when you leave kids alone, when you just let them naturally experience puberty and you help with the symptoms, the depression, anxiety, or other things that they're experiencing, 80 to 90, even I think one study was like 95% of kids grow out of it.
You're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Sean Graham.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're joining us today. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee and offer a conservative Christian worldview. We want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God, so please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments via email. Happy friendly comments can go to me directly, Matthew@tnchristian.com. Anything angry, send to Sean at tnchristian.com. Today's show is brought to you in the Memphis area by Herbie Systems. Give Herbie Systems a call at 901-451-8214 for all your lawn care needs. Since 1984, Herbie Systems has been the premier lawn care and landscape company in the Mid-South. So give Herbie Systems a call today. That's 901-451-8214, or visit herbiesystems.com and let them kill your weeds. Our scriptures for today are from Mark, the 9th chapter, verses 39 through 44. But Jesus said, "Forbid him not, for there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me. For he that is not against us is on our part. For whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because ye belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he were cast into the sea. And if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter into life maimed than having two hands to go into hell, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched." On December 4th, 2024, the Supreme Court of the United States heard arguments on banning gender-affirming care or child mutilation. This argument stems from the Tennessee bill we know as SB 1. The movement of this bill through the Tennessee legislative process was amazing to watch. The social and blogosphere battles of the early 2020s boiled over into legal wranglings over drag shows across the state of Tennessee. Longtime listeners will remember our open warfare with these groups and the threats they made against us. Eventually, that debauchery filed up enough people that all three of the grand divisions of our state came together and made it clear that we were done as a state with the trans indoctrination of our children. Christians were begging our state officials to stop the insanity of child mutilation and chemical castration that had become the normative treatment plan for so many wicked pediatric medical practitioners. When SB 1 was first drafted, I assumed, like many, that this effort would not get our Tennessee officials full support. After all, such an effort would require assuming that Tennessee has 10th Amendment rights. Our lawmakers have generally steered clear of anything having to do with pushback on the federal level, especially on 10th Amendment grounds. So who could blame us when Sean and I didn't hold much hope for SB 1? But now it's the little bill that could. The bill simply promotes reality by insisting that medical treatment must actually be for medical needs. That's almost too simple to believe. Doctors fulfilling their oath, doing no harm. Parents being allowed to tell doctors that experimental and life-threatening gender reassignment treatments are not allowed on their kids. But the Lord took a little bill in SB 1, and the legislators voted for it, and now they are proud of it, rightly so, and they are bragging about it because SB 1 is now being argued at the Supreme Court of the United States. We don't pretend to know how all of this will turn out, but God has already used it to show that when he is in it, a little effort will yield great things for his glory. Today's guest is Matt Sharp, who serves as senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, where he is the director of the Center for Public Policy. He leads ADF's team of policy experts as they craft legislation and advise government officials on policies that promote free speech, religious freedom, parental rights, and the sanctity of human life. Since joining ADF in 2010, Sharp has authored federal and state legislation that protects the First Amendment rights of Christians everywhere. He has testified before the United States Congress and in local state legislatures on the importance of protecting free speech and religious liberty in federal law. We are proud to have conservative Christian lawyers fighting on our side. Welcome back to Faith in Action, Matt Sharp.
Thanks for having me.
It's always great to have you on here, Matt. We love talking with ADF. You guys are such experts on all things legal and all things that are happening at the Supreme Court level. We love having you guys. Our conversations with you become amazing to us because you break down complicated legislative efforts and you always bring clarity to it because that's what you guys have such expertise. Thanks for coming back on and being willing to talk about this stuff with us.
Yeah, I'm always happy to. And it's like you said, a lot of times lawyers get a bad rap for we speak in legalese and obscure Latin phrases and all of that. And look, there's a lot of that happens. But one of the things at Alliance Defending Freedom we really want to do is take these big issues, these issues of your free speech rights, your religious liberty rights, efforts to protect families and children from harm, and just explain sometimes very complex laws or legal issues in ways that anyone can understand. Because at the end of the day, these are your rights, these are my rights. And if we can't understand them, if we can't know exactly what our Constitution protects, if we can't know exactly what these laws that we're discussing do, then they're ultimately not very helpful to us. So we really pride ourselves on how do we communicate this in a way that's winsome, that's a happy warrior mentality, but ultimately helps people understand I know what my rights are and I can confidently live out my faith and beliefs equipped with that knowledge.
And we love watching you guys, you in particular, Mary, other different people. And when you guys talk about this, there's a clear Christian underpinning to what you guys are doing. That can't be by chance. I mean, you guys are forcing that into these issues, and some of these are pretty controversial.
Yeah. Well, I think how we view it is we are defenders of truth, and that's truth with a capital T. There is truth that, for example, we are created male and female. There's truth about the role of parents to guide and direct their children. And there's truth about the idea that no one should tell someone what they can and cannot believe, what they can and cannot say. And so when we're advocating these, yes, these are biblical principles as we view them, but they're also principles that have formed the backbone of American society. It's the things that our founders had in mind when they established America. They wanted to preserve this as a unique nation where these freedoms can thrive and where truth is honored and respected. And so in many ways, we're just calling back to what we were originally founded for, is a place where people can live out their faith, can live according to the truth, and not fear the government telling them otherwise.
Amen. We love that.
Matt, on December 4th, I saw a video of you standing outside as protesters and supporters were holding rallies. Can you tell our listeners what it's like to be on the ground in D.C. on a day when you know historic events are taking place?
It's exciting. And if anyone ever gets the chance to attend a Supreme Court hearing, I mean, these are open to the public. You can show up, get in line, and hear it. It's worthwhile. I mean, this is our government in action. We've heard presidential speeches and maybe seen congressional debates, but to go hear an argument before the Supreme Court is great. But one of the exciting parts is around the Supreme Court, you have these rallies. You have supporters of one side, supporters of the other side out there. Always, a festive atmosphere that sometimes, as you said, it can be quite heated. I've had more than once where I've had a bullhorn, in my face, being yelled at and screamed at. But it is exciting because it's people that are ultimately passionate. They're passionate about their side. And in particular in December, we just saw so many people that were really standing for, going back to truth, standing for the truth that we are created male and female and that our laws should not hurt children that are experiencing discomfort with their sex by pushing them on drugs and surgeries. People that have experienced this, detransitioners that are just sharing stories from their heart about what they went through when they were subject to puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones or surgeries, and so many others just standing up for truth in this very beautiful moment in their stories. And so it is an exciting environment. But yes, it can be quite emotional at times when one side's up there talking about the truth and you have the other side blaring music and some heated conversations going on.
So is it different than it was say, in the Thurgood Marshall days? I mean, were people there on the grounds when Supreme Court cases were argued? I mean, I could think back to Brown v. Board. I know that there was a circus atmosphere to that where they created new testimony in front of the Supreme Court. Is it different now just because of media, or has it always been kind of an event?
Yeah, I think there's always been a little bit of that. You've had supporters and protesters outside the Supreme Court on the day of argument, but I think recently it's definitely ramped up a little bit more. You're going to see reporters out there interviewing people, chatting with them, getting a sense of their side of the story. And I think there is definitely the media side of things. Everyone likes a good image because you can't have cameras in the courtroom. So there's that desire to be able to hear from the people on the outside, to hear their stories, and to communicate that to the rest of the world that's watching.
Matt, one of the things with ADF is you guys do understand these bills, and this has been complicated at the Tennessee level. We've done a lot to move this bill forward that's become known as SB1. Explain to our listeners today why we need to know the intricate parts of this bill and why it's now an issue at the Supreme Court.
Well, simply put, no one should be harming children, especially pushing dangerous experimental puberty blockers, hormones, and even sterilizing surgeries on young kids that experience discomfort with their biological sex. So we have seen a growing chorus of voices from the scientific community, especially out of Europe, that have been talking about the dangers that these gender transition drugs and surgeries are doing on kids. In Europe, for example, they've been doing these for 20, 30 years, and they've been following the kids that they put on these hormones, that they did these surgeries on, and they followed the kids into adulthood. And what they found is that rather than helping kids, rather than alleviating the mental distress and other things, it makes it worse. In fact, in Sweden, the study that they did following these adolescents that had been given the hormones and surgeries into adulthood, they had 19 times higher rates of suicide than the rest of the population. Yeah. That's a tragedy when they're doing these things to kids, and it's making it worse. In response to that, these countries have been rolling it back and saying, we're not going to do the drugs and surgeries on kids anymore. Instead, if you've got a child that is dealing with that distress or confusion about their biological sex, let's give them counseling. Let's give them psychotherapy. Let's actually help them find comfort with their biology. And what they found is when you leave kids alone, when you just let them naturally experience puberty and you help with the symptoms, the depression, anxiety, or other things that they're experiencing, 80 to 90, even I think one study was like 95% of kids grow out of it. They don't have that experience anymore. So Tennessee lawmakers were looking at all of this. They were following the science, listening to what was coming out of Europe. And this all culminated when it came out that Vanderbilt University was doing these drugs and surgeries on kids. And in fact, one of their employees was bragging about it being a huge moneymaker for Vanderbilt. Wow. That's not why we give kids medicine to make money. No. We do it to help kids. So the Tennessee lawmakers, looking at the science, learning lessons from what Europe did and the mistakes they made, said, let's do better for Tennessee's kids and let's protect them, and say that gender clinics and others in Tennessee should not be giving kids puberty blockers, hormones, sterilizing surgeries as the solution for gender dysphoria. Rather, let's give them counseling and psychotherapy. There are better solutions for them. So that's simply what the law does, is just making sure that we're protecting kids from these dangerous drugs and surgeries, and also giving them relief, that if a kid was lied to or deceived, if they were pushed to do these drugs or surgeries, that we actually give them the ability to hold those gender clinics accountable.
You know, we originally, we've taken death threats, and we've been attacked locally, called all kinds of names because we stood against the trans rallies, the gender bending events they were doing around, and we helped advocate for those laws. And now the drag shows have been stopped in Tennessee. And now, we've helped and we've talked up this conversation about the gender affirming care and the all these problems that have come. We've been working with this, locally and at the state level, trying to get people talking about it. But these are complicated and they're kind of ugly conversations to have, really. These are not pleasant things to talk about. So a lot of our legislators were on a tour around the state. talking about how, oh, SB1's at the Supreme Court, and oh yay, we were part of that. But they didn't do that beforehand. And I'm really disappointed with that, because a lot of these guys that I see up there saying, matter of fact, I saw one of our reps right behind you while you were doing your video. He walked past your camera, photobombing you. And I'm just like, I wish they would have been doing the same conversation in Shelby County when they were trying to push this bill through, to advocate and help people understand this was not a mean, this was not a racist, this was not a hateful bill. This is a medical abuse of our children that we needed legislators to stand up proudly and say, we're not going to allow this abuse to continue. We're watching what's happening overseas. There's clinics that are closing, being shut down by the government. You guys at the Supreme Court level now have this huge hoopla. It's a national event, and everybody wants to, of course, jump on the bandwagon. But locally, I don't feel like our guys knew that enough. And so is there anything we could tell our listeners about how to get in when they hear these controversial bills and they start hearing this kind of stuff? Are there other states that are running this stuff, or any other institutions that we can look to for clarity on this kind of stuff? Because I know listeners don't know to go read a bill on this kind of stuff, but the information does seem very difficult. And I just wish there was better sourcing for them.
I think one thing that we saw with this is early on, when you had Tennessee and Arkansas and Alabama, that were some of the early states, like you said, there was a lot of confusion, misinformation. I think it's been encouraging to see how, as more voices have spoken out, especially detransitioners, the kids that did go through these drugs and surgeries and are now saying, I had irreversible damage done to my body. As they've spoken out, we have seen more and more people, I think, understand what the original heart of this law was. And we're now at 26 states that have joined Tennessee in passing these laws protecting kids from these drugs and surgeries. And so I think some of those early efforts really paid off to see that momentum grow. But one of the things we try and do at Alliance Defending Freedom, though, is to sort of raise awareness about these issues. Like you were saying earlier, gender ideology is popping up in so many areas, and it's hurting so many people, whether it's kids being pushed on these drugs and surgeries, whether it's girls losing spots on a sports team to a man taking that away, whether it's women in correctional facilities having a male placed in the same cell or restroom as them. It is tragic what is happening to so many people from this ideology. We have to get those stories out there so people understand we are for women. We are for kids and families. We are for free speech. We are for all of these things. And gender ideology is coming in and undermining and harming all of these groups of people, with it pushing this idea that you were born in the wrong body, that the truth of male and female, that we are created and designed differently. They're attacking that truth. And that's what it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. There's a need for truth and to stand for it. That's what these laws do. And I think we just have to really help educate and equip people to know it is best for society when we recognize and embrace the truth of what it means to be male and female. And when we reject that, as gender ideology does, there is unfortunately a long trail of people that are harmed by that.
It kind of helps to follow God's word, doesn't it? Imagine that. Well, I've got to ask you, so Scarmetti is our attorney general, and we're pleased with him pushing this legislation forward and being so supportive of it. He's a Memphian. We just really have been amazed with how solid he's been. But it's not like that everywhere. In particular, last time we had you on the show, we were talking about Gavin Newsom in California, and they had just passed AB 1955, which takes away parental rights in these situations. And we were calling it the kidnapping bill, which was basically what it was. If your kid got into their state and wanted to transition, they were allowed to, against the wishes of any parent, no matter where they came from. Amazing to me that that's even conscionable, but whatever. But do you see this? If SB 1 is upheld, what kind of ramifications will that be for places like California and their bills that they do have on the books right now?
Well, the ACLU and the Biden administration that's currently arguing against Tennessee's law, their argument is essentially that gender identity should be protected under our Constitution. If that argument wins, you can see that not only in places like California, but those policies could be pushed everywhere across the country. And the great gains that Tennessee and other states have made to protect kids, to protect women's privacy and safety and fairness in sports, could be undone. But the other side of that is if Tennessee wins, and we hope and believe they
Yes.
will,
Yeah,
thanks to the great work, as you said, Attorney General Skrmetti and his team did a phenomenal job
they
on this
really did.
case.
They
But if
did.
they do, that's going to help. The other states that are looking at these similar laws that have passed them and are working towards them, it's going to give them legal support to know that they can pass them and move forward with them. And then even in places like California, when you get a good ruling saying that our laws should follow science, that states and government entities can protect kids from gender ideology, it's like you said, we could see movement in California. Now, that may seem far fetched, but as you mentioned with AB 1955, a lot of that started because there were some good school boards in California that were actually trying to protect kids and protect parental rights and say, we're going to notify mom and dad if a child is experiencing distress about their biological sex. If they're wanting to go by a different name or pronoun, we ought to call mom and dad. That just seems common sense. And that's what
Seems
these
like
school boards were trying to do. And AB 1955 was California smacking down on that and saying, no, you've got to hide that information from parents. So a win in Skrmetti, a win for Tennessee, and a win for the ability of government officials to actually do the right thing and protect kids and ensure that they're not being harmed by gender ideology could help school boards in California and other places that want to do the right thing, that want to put kids' health and safety first.
Amen. That'd be awesome. We're here in the first week of the new year of 2025. Thank you for joining us in this new year. When do you think the Supreme Court, because they're not tied to a certain day to announce their rulings, right?
That's right. So generally, the Supreme Court, they operate in terms that run from October until usually about June-ish. And that's when they hear the cases sort of in the first few months. And then after that, they start writing the opinions. They're sending them back and forth, kind of discussing language and what the opinion will say. So most likely, we think the court will probably issue an opinion in Skrmetti later on at the end of the term. So probably May, most likely June is when they'll actually issue an opinion in this case. Could come earlier, but generally what we've seen in cases like this, the court really takes its time, wants to get it right in whatever opinion it issues. So we're hopeful to see something great come from the court in June.
Well, we are going to go ahead and I'm going to get you to commit to coming back on, and we'll have a victory party for that once that comes out, because I really did think the argumentation was very positive for us, I thought. And, some of the, we can never read the tea leaves too much, but I thought the justices reacted in a way that was looking like it was in our favor. So I'm very hopeful on that as well. But enough with that. What are you guys doing in 2025? Tell me about ADF. What are y'all's plans and what are y'all moving forward on?
Yeah, well, we're really excited, and I think one of the big things is that the Supreme Court just recently granted cert. So another case going to the Supreme Court. This one is out of South Carolina, where South Carolina was wanting to make sure that taxpayer dollars weren't going to Planned Parenthood. We know that the damage that Planned Parenthood has done to countless lives, obviously the abortion, but other things. And South Carolina was saying our tax dollars shouldn't be going to an organization like that. And so this is a case of whether these states like South Carolina can make sure that taxpayer dollars are not going to harm children, not going to harm families, but actually going to good organizations. So we're excited about that. And then so many other things of defending free speech, parental rights, the sanctity of human life. And so it's a great and exciting time. And obviously we're going to see what happens with a new administration as well, and hopefully to see some great things come out of the Trump administration and Congress, again, defending our fundamental rights and passing good laws and policies that further that.
Matt, tell everybody where they can find out more information about ADF.
Yeah. So they can visit us at our website, adflegal.org. That's adflegal.org, where they can learn about our cases, see how they can pray for the work that we're doing, and if so inclined, help support our work. Every case we do is pro bono. We do it free of charge. And so we are 100% funded through donations, large and small, that help us take these cases, that help us support legislators passing good laws, and ultimately defending the freedom of every American to speak and live the truth.
Do y'all have any idea what to do without having Jack the Cake Baker on your schedule?
Well, it's great for him that he's finally gotten relief. That was a 10+ year battle for him just to be able to live and work consistent with his belief and not be forced to create messages that violate his beliefs. So glad to see.
What a simple concept. Do your work. Right. Well, Matt, I just want to thank you guys for ADF and what you've done. And in the new year, if there's anything we can ever do to talk you guys up in issues, we feel so humbled to be able to call and reach out to you for your expertise. And I hope our listeners appreciate that. Thank you for coming on with us today.
Thank you very much. Great being here as always.
That's going to do it for another episode of Faith in Action, and we're thrilled that from now on we get to join you in Nashville, Memphis, and all over Tennessee as we talk about more ways to put your faith into action. Folks, if you want to hear more on this or other topics from a Christian worldview, head on over to botradionetwork.com and search for Faith in Action. There we have links to 5 years of past shows. You can listen to a wide range of guests sharing their wisdom about current events that affect all 3 grand divisions of Tennessee and the entire nation. And until next week, remember, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.